It's my pleasure to introduce Shreya Nallapati. Shreya is the founder and executive director of Never Again Tech. This is a project that uses artificial intelligence and machine learning to prevent mass shootings. After watching Emma Gonzalez address the death of 17 of her classmates at the Parkland shooting, Shreya knew she wanted to take technology to empower the movement as opposed to simply posting thoughts and condolences. Shreya currently leads a team of 200 young women all across the nation who are passionate about using computer science for social good. She has been featured in Forbes, the Smithsonian Institute, NPR, Solomon's Code, Humanity in a World of Thinking Machines, and has been recognized by actress Amy Poehler, among many others. Shreya will be featured in an upcoming documentary titled The Great Divide, Among the Heroes Fighting Gun Violence, and is in talks about filming a second one solely on her work with Never Again Tech. She was named as Colorado Youth Tech Leader of the Year and is one of over 33,000 global teen leaders from across the world representing the United States. I'm going to hand it off to Shreya. Thank you for being here today and inspiring all of us on how to think big around solutions. So take it away.
Perfect. So yeah, hi everyone. It's really nice to meet everyone here. I have to give an ode to Danielle for organizing such an innovative conference during such a tumultuous time. And today, when I got to sit in one of the group activities, I had so much fun getting to learn about what everyone was doing, and it's just so inspiring to see this go about. So I'll go ahead and get started with my talk. It's really called The Power of Networks in Preventing Mass Shootings. Again, thank you so much, Danielle, for the warm and kind introduction. I promise you I'm not that cool in real life, but I'll go ahead and get started. So Never Again Tech, like Danielle mentioned, is a cohort of 200 data scientists, policymakers, researchers, and business executives coming together to build a neutral tech platform that aims to dismantle the black box of gun violence and mass shootings. And yes, Danielle was correct. We are majorly composed of young women, but what we really aim on doing is looking at the convergence of policy, technology, entrepreneurship, and social advocacy to come together and build a solution that looks at what fundamentally constitutes the anatomy of a mass shooting and how we can predict trends from that. It's a very novel idea, and what it really aims on doing is taking existing technology and existing algorithms and applying it in a new way. I think I was very inspired to create this after not only what Danielle said, which was Emma Gonzalez speaking after the Parkland shooting, but also from the fact of I've had so much experience with Silicon Valley, and over there they have so many innovative ideas, so many ideas that go from, range from everything from, let's develop an automated car to let's develop, robots that can see, speak, and think like humans, right? And I was like, well, this is all great, but at the end of the day, people are dying, and we don't really have a system in place. We don't really have things in place that we can prevent this from happening. I think it's a lot more pivotal to be focusing on technology and innovation when it regards things like the coronavirus or worldwide pandemics. Gun violence is another epidemic to be focusing on here, but instead I think that, right now the world is focusing on developing technology after technology that's not very applicable to the human. So that's really what Never Again Tech is. It's about that technological component for human problems. And so with Never Again Tech, we've accomplished some amazing things. I'll go to the next slide. I think I already talked about this. So again, our solution requires innovation from different perspectives. There's technology, there's the machine learning and predictive analytics on existing data sets. There's the policy aspect here, which is really convergence with policymakers to enact our findings from what we find in our data sets and what we understand. Like the best example of this is with Hickenlooper's presidential campaign. We were able to, the overarching policy was about enacting red flag laws. But what we decided to bring towards the table is what exact red flag should we be looking for when it comes to perpetrators? And we took what we already have in terms of data analysis and what we have in terms of the existing data sets that exist and identify the commonalities between perpetrators to understand, okay, here are where the red flag laws are going to be most effective. And there's a social advocacy perspective here. We work a lot with organizations like Everytown, Moms Demand Action, the Sandy Hook Promise. We work with these organizations to, again, develop an additional layer. We pay homage to what they've already been doing in terms of rallying around activism. But what we want to do is, again, aim to introduce a more neutral, less alienating perspective when it comes to talking about mass shootings. We fundamentally aren't left or right leaning. We're very, we have people who are pro Second Amendment on our team, people who are very liberal, but again, it's that convergence of these multiple perspectives to come together and take what we fundamentally all know, technology, and use it for good. And finally, there's an entrepreneurial aspect to this. We are trying to develop an economically feasible product that when we can sell it and develop profits off of it, it'll contribute back greater to society. So this isn't just a nonprofit organization. It's almost like a tech startup with an aim of social entrepreneurship. And so in terms of okay, great, this Never Again Tech is a cool idea, but what have you actually done with it? What are you aiming to do? So in here, I'll reiterate, the aim of Never Again Tech is to take the data sets that exist, to expand on them, to develop, to bridge the gaps there are in gun violence data, and then develop accurate, realistic machine learning models. So not just throwing a neural network at it for my AI people and calling it a day, but developing very realistic models that can take these existing evidences and kind of extrapolate and build out an idea of what mass shootings could look like in the future. We're not looking at predicting the next mass shooting because I have to say it's very random. I cannot tell you based on technology that tomorrow there's going to be a mass shooting at this time with this person and that. But what we really aim to do is, okay, well, looking at these general patterns and trends, this next period of 2 to 3 months, for example, is a very critical time for mass shooting activity. And here's what we can do about it. And so that's not something that's currently existing right now in terms of other startups or people who are looking at this area. Right now, we are so focusing on mitigating the after effects of every mass shooting that we really don't look at, in my opinion, we don't really look at, well, what are the tangible steps that we can take to prevent the next incident from happening? And so that's exactly what Never Again Tech really aims to do. So going into what we have done so far with this entire premise that we've built, we detected 3 of the biggest mass shootings of 2019 before they occurred, by alerting appropriate law enforcement officials. So unfortunately, I'm not able to talk about which ones we were able to detect, but the technology that we developed basically does data scraping and data mining in a very privacy-oriented way on fringe communities like 8chan and 4chan. So from there, we were able to understand where the biggest where we saw the most vitriolic hate language towards, in which forums, the communities that were impacted by those forums, and we were able to understand, okay, this post seems like it's very indicative of a mass shooting. And another integral thing to understand here is through our technology that we're developing, we're really aiming on using natural language processing, which is basically a text-based AI, to determine what's a hoax versus what's a real threat. So unfortunately for us, we deal with a lot of mass shooting hoaxes. Unfortunately in schools, people really like to, proliferate mass shootings as for trolling or for attention, saying don't come to school tomorrow. So what we were really able to do was take an example of an existing NLP algorithm and apply it to social media regarding violence and mass violence, and we have an 84% accuracy that we're currently developing to make it more accurate on determining what kind of syntax what kind of syntax is more indicative of a hoax versus what kind of syntax is very indicative of a real threat. Additionally, we developed the first ever iOS app to help gun violence victims with PTSD. So the app developers on our team were able to create the Never Again Tech app. It's not public facing for now for other reasons, but it deals with giving PTSD symptoms or treating PTSD symptoms through an app format, like a breathing exercises, CBT exercises, journaling exercises. We developed this app so other members of other gun violence victims are able to share their stories with each other in a very coveted private platform. We developed policies for presidential and senatorial candidates like Michael Bennet, Michael Bloomberg, Governor Hickenlooper, like I already mentioned, and we're trying to develop very data science oriented initiatives to the White House through the Chief Data Science Officer for the White House and for the FBI and the CIA and other law enforcement agencies. And to date, we're compiling the largest mass shooting database. Something that's very important to consider here is through the CDC, the Dickey Amendment prevented CDC or any other organization from conducting gun violence research or anything that's inherently anti-gun. So there's a huge gap in gun violence data from like 2010 onwards. So right now we're going back in and we're fixing those patches because accurate algorithms can only be developed with the accurate data. And so what we're doing right now is kind of building and creating that patchwork and having our researchers fill in the gap where organizations like CDC and everyone else couldn't have done it. So this brings me to our case study. So I will drop it in a link afterwards. We basically created a white paper. Our white paper basically, since we've been analyzing gun violence and mass shootings for the past 2 years in depth, we realized that we have a new hypothesis. So the hypothesis is that mass shooting activity will increase drastically after extended quarantine periods. Again, I'll drop the link so people can read it in depth. What we really did was we looked at 3 integral factors. There's a recession in the economy, a significant uptake in firearm purchases, an increase in vitriolic language against Asian Americans and fringe communities. So before, when we were analyzing gun violence and the factors that lead to it, these 3 factors individually are already enough to indicate a critical period in mass shooting activity. For example, after there's a huge recession in the economy, there were multiple research initiatives enacted where people saw that there was a huge trend, a discernible trend in mass shooting activity. The hypothesis for this is that whenever there are periods of economic instability, that's when people that's when people who are more inclined to commit acts of mass violence are more perturbed, leading to periods where violence is something that's very, very tangible. For example, unemployment is a really big factor when it contributes to the average mass shooting, right? And so when, that's why there's the entire phrase of going postal, because when someone is unemployed, the most critical time for mass shooting activity is within the couple of days since they have been fired, especially if they don't have contingency plans. So with this recession in the economy from coronavirus periods, we're seeing that there's a lot more unemployment, bankruptcy rates, therefore making it something that would put us on high alert for mass shooting activity. There has been a significant uptake in firearm purchases. So some areas like Nevada and Arizona have seen a 250% increase in firearm purchases. This is something that's very critical to understand because the last time firearm purchases that have occurred like this was after Hurricane Katrina and 9/11. And so usually there were some interviews that we read and analyzed from people who purchase guns in these kind of periods, and they said that having guns and having unfiltered access to guns is something that provides a sense of comfort and stability to a person in a period where the government isn't necessarily acting in their right choices. So that's another factor that we understood as a layer and component to this. Finally, and this is probably where our most critical work comes in, we saw a huge increase in vitriolic language against Asian Americans. So we analyzed and crawled over 1 million posts on 4chan and 8chan and other fringe community areas, and we saw some incredible, 65% increase in hate-based language and very, very extreme hate-based language, espousing violence and calling for violence and advocating for it in these areas. So we're saying that the culmination of these 3 factors makes it a very critical period after quarantines and after lockdown restrictions start to recede a little bit. We're really predicting that these next periods are going to be critical for mass shooting activity. And so then, with going back to the theme of networks and systems, we worked with policy writers, social workers for intervention strategies, and data scientists to corroborate our findings. So within this white paper, we decided, well, who can we reach out to help spread the message about this? Who can we reach out to that can corroborate the findings and help provide mitigation mechanisms? So that's when we looked at very untraditional channels. That's when my team member had the idea of, let's reach out to social workers. What kind of intervention strategies can they recommend, either physically or online? what can we do as bystanders to when we see hate-based language and hate generally targeted towards a minority group? What can we do about that? So that's something we also included in this white paper. So this case study kind of provides an example of where we identified a problem, where we found the appropriate representatives from each field to help us, and how we coalesced to find a proper solution. So I wanted to provide this as an example of how we relied on different networks from untraditional areas to come together and converge on a problem that affects us all. So then Danielle mentioned this, but there's this thing called the ripple effect. So soon after the idea of Never Again Tech came to fruition, we saw some incredible patterns occur. Within our organization, the members that I don't directly oversee decided to collaborate out of their own comfort zone and without our guidance, and ask other people who are not traditionally related to their idea for help. For example, within our mental health app, we didn't even provide guidance, but the team members decided to coalesce around the initiative of reaching out to the American Psychological Association, therapists and different and mental health workers across the state to develop, to get a better understanding of the mental health regarding gun violence victims. So that is something that they did out of their own initiative that didn't really require us going in and asking them to do. And I think this is something incredible and attests greatly to the power of networks, because once one network was created, a multitude of networks internal to the organization started to occur and provide very fruitful collaborations. Externally, we saw a huge influx in cross-collaborative technological efforts, and they directly paid homage to us, saying, we decided to take your idea of using technology in a human-oriented way. And now those same organizations, although they're a little bit microcosmic, are aiming to tackling like anything from pandemics, earthquakes, to racial profiling. So it's really the identification of the fact that, we all have phones, we all use Google, we use the internet, and we have so much data out there, and let's try to utilize it in a positive way that can help others. This one very general idea people decided to take that, and now are using it in their different ways. So that's something that what the consequences of the ripple effect is, what we would see in this network identification. And so I'm going to wrap it up now so we can have time for questions, but I kind of wanted to show this photo to you. It kind of became a national photo. I took it at the scene of the STEM high school mass shooting that happened last May. It was something that's very personal for me, because my younger brother was in the classroom next to the shooter where the shooting happened. And so he saw the bullet get lodged in the wall, he saw the glass shards, and he saw the blood everywhere. And it's really hard for me to talk about, but the reason why I wanted to bring it up is I took this photo that you see in the background that same day. And in the very far left corner, in the very far left corner, you can see there's a young girl praying. And first of all, there are a lot of really big glaring problems. The fact that young kids actually in like kindergarten and second grade are forced to come out of the building with their hands on their heads. But then you see like the emotional impact that it has. The fact that one girl was found praying in such a traumatic incident shows that there's a really compelling problem here. This is what motivates us to continue to do our work every day, because we don't want our children to be facing the same things that we have. And so that's something that's like the problem identification. This isn't an initiative just centered around data science and predictive analytics. It's a very human-oriented initiative. There are emotions behind the data and statistics that we see. And every single person on the team has experienced a mass shooting one way or the other. We've seen some of the team members have experienced 3 mass shootings in their lifetime, directly involved in them. Some of us have only seen it through news channels. But at the end of the day, it's a problem that's very prevalent and impacts us all. So we use that's the emotional motivation behind this mission, that we don't want our kids, these young kids that you see right here, to go through the same things that our generations have been brought up in. And I think that's why it motivates me as a young person, because, for me, I realized that I can't really do anything about this by just waiting for the adults, or by waiting for other people other than me to take initiative and do something about the problem. I decided, here's a problem that I'm seeing faced. I grew up in Colorado. I've seen Columbine. I've experienced the Arapahoe shooting, and now the STEM shooting, right? So it's something that I've seen, but I wanted take the action, because it's better that you do it instead of waiting for someone else to go ahead and do it for you. And so I just wanted to mention this as kind of the emotional motivation, what drives our team to wake up every morning. It's the fact that this is such a prevalent tragedy in the United States, and not for other countries, but specifically for the United States. The fact that there aren't really a lot of people doing action in the way that we want to see it happen, because there hasn't been a lot of technology initiatives surrounding mass shootings. And what we wanted to do is rise up and take control and find the appropriate networks that we could reach out to kind of converge on this common problem that everyone is facing. And so with that, I think I'll leave it for time for questions. But for further information about our organization, I know I talked really fast. These are our contact information. We're always looking for different input. We're always hiring people to come in and join us. Like the other day, I got an email from someone, and she ended up being the person who helped me write the white paper. So we're here for your input. Follow us on our social media. You can be a lot more in tune with what we're doing on a day-to-day basis. But I'm going to leave it over to Danielle now. Thank you very much.
Okay, Shreya, thank you so much. It's so amazing to watch you think and hear what you have to say. So I hope that you take a minute to see all of the great comments going on in the chat right now, because they're amazing. And I want you to know that we put links to your white paper already up in there. So if anybody is interested in the white paper, which is something that you might also want to pass around to your policymakers,
yes.
It's something there for you. So Shreya, I'm torn between like wanting to read all of the great comments to you, and also, but I'm going to go to questions. So I'm just going to go straight to the ones that we had here. But here's the first one. Okay. I'm sure you've had plenty of people who told you this isn't a fixable problem, that it's too hard to change. The attendees here might hear the same when they try to make change. How do you deal with people who put up barriers to your solutions?
Well, I mean, I'm like, I don't know if I should say the F word or not, but you know what I'm saying? I think that when you have something so driven for you, you see and experience the impacts of such a tragedy in your own home, and you've seen how helpless people become, how helpless people are. The parents that were outside of the school wondering whether or not their kid was safe, that's something that says, well, here's my innovation and here's my solution. I think that when you're so, integrated into what the problem is, and you've seen the consequences it's had on society and your family, there's not really a lot of things that can dissuade you from reaching a solution. That being said, as much as I do have that attitude, I do try to take critical input. When people say that, the technology isn't really making sense, or, how can AI be used in this problem? That's when I try to aim to understand where they're coming from. And that's when I realized throughout this project, oh, AI is something that has a really big misconception. People think it's still about robots and everything, right? But then I was like, well, let me try to work through that to change, not to change an opinion, but to provide better illumination to what exactly we're doing. So whenever people do say, hey, it's impossible, because, oh my gosh, I've had my fair share from everyone. Sometimes at one point, my own friends were like, are you sure you can do this? Obviously there are the cliche answers of, you have to believe in yourself, nothing is impossible, but there's also that element of, what's the harm in trying? There isn't any initiative out there right now like this, and obviously if it ends up failing, you'll fail. But I don't want to go without trying this every possible avenue I can from the perspective of a technologist. So I think that the most innovation comes out of trying something. If it fails, it fails. If it succeeds, it succeeds. But there is that element of trying it. And that's what I would say is really important here.
Yeah. I said this before. I think the message, and I put it in the chat, is to be like Shreya.
Oh my gosh. Please.
Okay, so let me ask another question. Catherine Bond asks, I'm going to read out names now. It's a great model for how to develop a different normal in so many different areas. I'd love to learn, I would love to learn more about how you manage partners with different perspectives. How do you bring them on board? How do you manage disagreements? And have you created shifts in how they work?
I would say a very strong legal team. I've had a lot of, jokes aside, there are a lot of people who disagree, but I think that the conviction and like the demographic of the people behind this speaks for itself. So I've had people, especially adults, you know, because I'm only 19, I'm only 19, you know, say, you know, like this sounds great in practice, but you're great in theory, but not in practice. People who say that, but I think the power of networks is finding like-minded individuals. So for every person who's a naysayer, there are probably 10 other people who agree exactly with what I'm saying or agree with what I'm saying, but with a different variation. So I think that once you have a strong enough message, the real key thing here is message. When you have a strong enough message behind what your organization is doing, then it's very easy to find people who are emotionally charged by that same message. So I think that, and then from their partnerships are easily to do it. And I think that something else is like, there are so many people who are involved, like research institutions from like Georgia Tech to Stanford to, you know, like different like campaigns to like different like nonprofit organizations. We use like network maps to really help it out. So on our website, you'll see we use this very popular networking map called kumu.io, which basically puts everything onto a screen, and it shows, okay, well, Never Again Tech has these partners in these areas. These are how they're connected. If you go onto the website, you can find it under our projects tab. But kind of keeping that in mind is a really easy way to kind of go about it.
Awesome. Actually, along that line, let me ask you this question. Are the data publicly available, and has there been a mapping of the network of platforms that facilitate mass shootings?
Network of the platforms, so I'm assuming like the fringe communities that are available to do that. Yeah, we have done that, which is why we've identified the 10 or so like incredibly important areas, because understanding hate language and how it's perpetuated is a whole network within itself. There's been so much science done, research done around it already. We're just enacting it and trying to like, you know, turn it into something tangible. But yes, there are networks. Like the first thing that I did when I created this was like, what already exists? Because what last thing we want to do is like, you know, reinvent the wheel, right? So what we're doing instead is, okay, we identified the systems in place, the, you know, areas that other people have already used and utilized. And then we created, okay, well, here's the areas that we're going to focus on, because tackling mass shootings is such a big deal in and of itself. But when you kind of construe it into something smaller and looking at one specific area that you can do the most work in, for us, it's hate language and shooter manifestos and all of that, then it's easier to go about it. So yes, tangentially, yeah, we did do a lot of that, and we have a lot of the network maps that we have of like which data sets exist already and all of that are internal to our organization, but they do exist.
Yeah. Okay, I have well, actually, I have a comment. What you're doing reminds me, when I first started my career at the Rand Corporation, my first job was to work on terrorist networks, and we would look at others would look at websites, and we would map out positive, negative, and neutral valences across networks, and to see these covert networks through these mechanisms that, you know, that we were just coding and not even going as far as predicting, but to make visible these systems and these networks in ways that you are is just incredibly powerful. And it's really the kind of magic behind all of this is that you bring understanding, but in your case, warning, you know, and hopefully like really connecting to saving lives. Let me see, I'm reading from another.
Sorry, do you mind taking if I take a quick photo? I'd love to like get it.
You do, and I've taken a photo of you already too. Put up there. You guys, I just love Shreya. Everything she does makes me want to just like be in her world. Okay, let me just go to this point. Let's kind of, this is my big question for you, because we're about to ask people now to go back to their tables, think about those problems that they were just working on, and come up with solutions. And you all might be happy to know Shreya is going to kind of hang out with me as we close out the conference. But Shreya, so we're gonna, after this, what we're gonna do is just take our very last break of the day. I think we're only gonna have a 5-minute break because we've got some good energy, and I want to take it right into solutions. But Shreya, here's what I think everyone is thinking. How on earth can we come up with, oh, there's our picture in the chat. How on earth can we come up with a solution in the next 20 to 30 minutes? So what I'd like you to do is tell this group how long it took you to come up with your solution.
Oh, 5 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes, actually. It's a very incredible story. So as soon as it's almost like out of a movie. As soon as I saw Emma Gonzalez speak, there's something in my mind that just clicked. It was like a very loose idea at the beginning. I was like, oh, what if someone used technology? What if someone used technology? And then within 5 minutes, I was like, oh, okay, what if I use technology, right? So it's like, it was a very, very instantaneous reaction. It didn't take like hours and hours or like months like it takes for some people to develop. It really was looking at what is my identity? I'm a technologist. What skills do I have? Machine learning and AI. What problem exists already? Mass shootings. So it's just a very easy coming together of those three factors. So I guess to the people who I think you guys have like a pitch thing coming up, really look at what is something I can bring to the table in terms of skills, in terms of my specialities. What is an existing problem that is something I want to tackle, and what ways can I bring those two fields together to come up with a solution? And so I think that's exactly how Never Again Tech was created, and that's how it was a very easy, simple process. It's just a matter of making that connection.
Okay, it is official. I think you've blown everyone's minds. Every time you speak, I'm like, oh my gosh, be like Shreya. So, that you heard it, you all. You all have 20 to 30 minutes to find solutions. So Shreya came up with this one to one of our most wicked problems in 5 minutes. So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna go ahead and just have a 5-minute break so everyone can get their last stretch on, do the turns and the drinks of water that you need, get the energy you need to get through the end of our sprint here with some really awesome solutions. So we're gonna take a 5-minute break, come back, and then Shreya and I are gonna give you the directions for your last pitch competition, and then we will go back into our groups and just end the day with a quick recap of everything and a little bit of discussion. So Shreya, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for giving me this wonderful opportunity, Danielle. It's indescribable. I'm here if anyone just wants to start a chat with me on Slack or LinkedIn. Or I left my contact information if you have any questions, but I'll be here for the next hour.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. So 5 minutes, everyone, and then you can come back around your tables, and we will end this day on a really fast-paced solutions exercise.